the day number 10, and in doing so I declare the House in committee for further consideration of the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2. I do. Excuse me then. We go back one step. The question is that the Construction Contracts Amendment Bill be considered by the Commerce Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Therefore, I call on Government Order of the Day number 10.
Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2, committee stage.
I declare the House in committee for further consideration of the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker. Members, the House and Committee for further consideration of the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2. When we were last considering the bill, we were debating part 1. Chris Hipkins has the call. He's just under 3 minutes remaining. If he doesn't seek the call, we are on part 1. Andrew Little.
Mr Chairman, I rise to speak, as the Labor Party has, in support of the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2, and remind the House just how important this piece of legislation is. I am somewhat surprised, Mr Chairman, that here, nearly the middle of June, in a year in which we are having local body elections, we are dealing with law changes that arose out of the last set of local body elections more than 2.5 years ago, and we are now frankly down to the wire, making changes that will have a bearing upon this year's elections, at least in relation to candidates' returns, in terms of their election expenses, and also residential declarations. And, Mr Chairman, we know why this is important, because there were aspects of the 2010 local body elections that were frankly a disgrace. And they have been, there are consequences to that election that have been played out not only in the great city of Auckland, the super city of Auckland, some have described it, but also in this House because of the conduct of some individuals arising out of that election. And what has become patently clear is that we now have a government, even on important legislation like this, which is propped up by shabby, tawdry members who have muddled around and mucked around at the local body level, caused disgrace to themselves and their so-called parties, or what's left of them, and shone a very poor light on the government of the day. And frankly, Mr Chairman, the people of New Zealand expect better. The people of New Zealand expect that in the government of the day, not only the members of the party that lead the government, but also those who support it through agreements, formal and informal, that they are people of good character, that they are people who act with integrity and indeed with honesty, and indeed act in a way that is befitting of members of a government. But we have a government that is increasingly supported by people who can only be described as shonky, as lacking in integrity, as lacking in credibility, and yet this government is utterly and totally dependent and reliant upon them. What sort of shabby government do we have now? Well, the answer to that question is pretty obvious. And the Minister in the chair, who only this morning defended his role in local government and in relation to housing, and enunciated an entirely new philosophy of trickle-down housing philosophy, and wants to impose that philosophy on every local government in this country. Well, it just shows you what a pretty pass we have come to. Mr Chairman. This bill will make differences to the declaration of campaign expenditure. That is long overdue, and we simply should never have been put in the position where a candidate, any candidate in any local body election, can be the recipient of brown paper envelopes stuffed with cash from large corporate donors, who can then apparently, credibly, here comes Mr Borrows, the anti-union rhetoric, the union haters and the union wreckers opposite They hate the idea of people acting collectively. They hate the idea of people exercising their freedom of choice to act collectively. That's the nature of this government. Not enough to be propped up by the tawdry, shabby people and their informal supply and confidence agreements, but they act as they always have done. The anti-union wreckers and haters of old have come back. Well, if it wasn't enough for Tauhenare to express the values of the 1950s back here earlier this morning, now we have them back again. The 1951ers of the national government hate unions, hate working people who exercise their freedom of choice. And that's why, sir, they bridle and resist at any attempt to regulate local government. And Mr Burrows of all knows, because over the water supply agreement in the Stony Creek water supply agreement that we had rammed through this House, rammed through the South Taranaki District Council at his and Shane Ardern's behest. They know all about local government. They've never shown any respect for it at all, and that's why they uncomfortably and grudgingly passed this legislation, which will tidy up just an element of it and ensure that those who stand for local government, Mr Chairman,
I call the honourable member Andrew Little.
That those who stand for local government and for office in local government at least meet some test of good character and integrity and probity. This bill will, when passed, ensure that the declarations made by candidates for local government shine a proper light on their expenditure and those who have supported them, and that campaign managers cannot be prevailed upon to make declarations that clearly are not credible and that clearly are not honest. That this bill, when passed, will provide thresholds that by and large are meaningful and credible, except of course for those campaigning in the super city of Auckland. And my good colleague Phil Twyford will have a supplementary order paper that will deal with the issue of campaign spending limits that under this bill are set extraordinarily high, at an extraordinarily high level, when that is not necessary. And indeed, when the most recent candidates in Auckland attested that the levels at which they are set clearly are not necessary if they are to run a credible campaign. So those are all good things in this bill, and we welcome the opportunity to tidy up this piece of legislation. Many members who come to this House come through the local government channel. They come through, they cut their teeth on local government, understand what government processes are, they learn about regulation at a local level, they learn that local government has an important role to play in ensuring good peace and good order in the community, that one ratepayer's freedom invariably cannot be exercised unless it is often at the expense of another, and therefore that we have local government to play an appropriately moderating and mediating role when it comes to regulation at a local government level. But we need to make sure that those who stand for public office, even at that local government level, do so under a system, a framework that is appropriate and ensures integrity and credibility and honesty, that we don't have people who are sponsored by corporates or the rich and the wealthy, that we don't allow Tammany Hall politics to infect local government in this country. We don't want the situation where local government can be controlled by a small elite, a plutocracy or an oligarchy, that we allow proper freedom and democracy to operate at the level of local government, and that people who stand for public office there open themselves up, open up their spending to a proper process of scrutiny. And this bill will allow that in its provisions, and it's for that reason that we support it.
I call the honourable member Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr.